Now, if you could take your seats, please, ladies and gentlemen. I open this meeting of the Council of the 11th of August 2021, acknowledgement of country. The Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledge the Gundungurra and Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call Wingecarribee Shire. I pay my respect to elders, both past, present and emerging. I'd also extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here today or watching this, the council prayer. Let us meet in this council chamber in a spirit of fellowship and goodwill to represent all members of the community in its cultural and religious diversity, to be honest and objective in all our deliberations, to respect the view of residents, the rights of all to express their opinions without fear or favour, and to make decisions for the common good of the community. General Manager, apologies. Obviously, there's none. In opening the meeting, I'd welcome Mr. Malcolm Ryan. I think over 90 people know Mr. Ryan already, and people who've had problems with the Council's planning department. Welcome, Mr. Ryan, and congratulations to the General Manager for capturing him. Adoption of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on 14 July 2021. I have an alteration, not to the actual minutes, but to the record of the Council. I think it's important that where letters are reported to Council, that they should be acknowledged in the minutes, just not attached to the Council's record on the website. So I would move in relation to the minutes of the meeting held on 14 July, that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on Wednesday, 14 July, minute numbers 185 to 209 inclusive, be adopted as a correct record of the proceedings, subject to the following being noted. Item 8.2, organisation restructure, realignment, that the General Manager provided to Council a presentation, realignment and review of structure, a copy of which will be attached to the minutes. Item 11.2, local strategic planning statement and local housing strategy, outcomes of re-exhibition. And item 11.3, planning proposal to amend Wingecarribee Local Environmental Plan 2010 with regard to council-owned public reserve land at Redford Park Barrel and Alimbo Street, Moss Vale. The strategic, and the note will be that the Manager's Strategic Land Use Planning provided a detailed overview to Council and advised receipt of the following correspondence from Darren and Elise Tor of Colo Vale, from Cardno on behalf of the owner of the site known as Colo Vale South, and Design 4 Planning generally requesting that the matter be deferred, and declare that carried. In relation to the minutes of the meeting of Council held on 28 July, I would move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on, the extraordinary meeting of Council held on 28 July be adopted as a correct record of the proceedings of that meeting, and declare that carried. Next item is administrator minutes. In view of the importance of my report to the Minister in relation to the suspension of Council until 10 December, I'm limiting the community update to that topic today. Late yesterday, I submitted a report under section 438N of the Local Government Act to the Minister for Local Government, and now formally table same. Based on the evidence, I have formed the view that the suspended Council has failed the community in the exercise of its functions, provision of core services, decision-making, community participation, financial management, and its responsibilities in related to integrated planning and development and reporting, sorry. As such, I formally recommended to the Minister that 1, a public inquiry under Section 438U of the Local Government Act into Wingecarribee Shire Council be held. 2, the inquiry have a concise terms of reference. 3, the inquiry report within 6 months with a view to facilitating the return of local democracy to the Shire. The reviews and audits that have been commissioned speak for themselves. My letter advises the Minister that they provide the evidence that the suspended councillors and former staff had scant regard to statutory obligations or the community they were elected or appointed to serve. It's clear that the performance order issued in September last year failed. Even though predating the order, a good example of how out of touch councillors were with their constituency was when a resident made their views known to a councillor about the Station Street matter. The reply stated, and I quote, "I am the one with the vote, so you don't count." End of quote. This is indicative of the manner in which the council considered the views of its community. In coming to my conclusion, I thank the over 230 individuals I have met with, together with the 37 community groups. The most poignant examples which I have given in much greater detail, of course, to the Minister, and which you can read later, include Wingecarribee Shire Council Bushfire Response and Recovery Review 2021. The report contains 44 recommendations and is highly critical not only of council's response but preparedness. 24% of the Shire was subject to burn scar. 68 residences were destroyed and damaged. 197 outbuildings destroyed and 69 damaged. A total of 72 community submissions were made to the review and 48 community members registered to attend online meetings in Penrose and Balmoral. 17 submissions were received from council employees. Of concern is the fact that Mr. Owens has advised that 15 were confidential as the employees were in fear of retribution. Righting the wrongs. Second report on planning, development and regulatory services. Where do you start with the report of Ernst Consulting? Add to this report the scathing assessment of the Small Business Commissioner and his 20 recommendations. Consideration of the housing strategy has led to more evidence of political games and interference. Compliance with the law. These reviews detail a disregard of council's statutory obligations in some areas of the organisation. This appears to be a result of the disregard and or knowledge of legislation and delegated authority. There are a myriad of challenges that confront the organisation, and the opportunity for suspended council to again meddle must not be allowed. De facto council meetings. It is clear that councillor briefings, workshops and advisory committees have, on some occasions, taken informal decisions that have been acted on by staff. Residents and ratepayers are rightly concerned that a return of suspended councillors will impact on the work done to date. Civic Centre refurbishment project. Apart from engaging Finch Consulting to review expenditure on the Civic Centre, time did not permit for me to have a look at concerns of some employees and residents as to whether council and its community got value for their money. New information has come to hand that appears to show that council has misled the Office of Local Government in the submission of its capital expenditure review. The contract was signed before OLG acknowledgement was given. Council accepted a contract for $6.8 million and has now allocated $10.8 million, nearly 60% more. Why? And how have the contract variations been handled? The project is still not completed, and while it appears in some areas to have achieved its objective, I can only say that the newly constructed meeting rooms and areas for the Mayor and General Manager are extravagant. The council chamber where we meet today appears to have a them and us design. The library configuration delivers an outcome that does not meet state library population size benchmarks, which limits council's ability to attract capital funding from the State Library of New South Wales. While I've asked the General Manager for a detailed report in relation to this project, it is not possible to interview former or suspended councillors or former staff, and a reference to a public inquiry may be the only way to the truth. Ombudsman's report. The fact that the Ombudsman found that council acted unreasonably has not been accepted by the suspended council. Temporary staff. Over the past 4 years, council has reported expenditure of just under $4 million in payments to an external consultancy for temporary staff, with an average of approximately $800,000 per annum in the development and planning assessment area. This is significant expenditure, resulting in false economies and community concerns around perceptions of consultants working for council, as well as providing advice and professional services for applicants dealing with the council. While I have no evidence of impropriety, the matter of perception and subsequent destabilising of community confidence in the council is of great concern. I've asked the General Manager, as part of her organisation structure review, to pay particular attention to this matter. Staffing matters other than senior staff. A toxic workplace with substantiated allegations that bullying, preferential treatment, and an organisation structure that was built on personality, not community, is what confronted the senior people I brought into this organisation. The General Manager has now advised me that in view of the confidential nature of a number of matters, she'll be making a submission to the Office of Local Government under separate cover. Prior to finalising my report yesterday, yet another matter was brought to my attention. While in no way questioning the merit of the projects involved, concern has been expressed by the General Manager on the legality of loans to community and sporting organisations of approximately $900,000. One of the so-called loans is for $220,000 and has no legal or written obligation for repayment and appears to be interest-free. Another safety net funding agreement has been identified for an amount of $470,000 payable over 10 years to construct a clubhouse and car park. There are no details in the council resolution in relation to surety, obligations for repayment, or interest payable, and I've asked the General Manager for an urgent report. While giving notice of suspension, the Minister for Local Government noted that the earlier performance improvement order had been unsuccessful in affecting cultural change and the behaviour of some councillors and improving relationships at the council. What has been identified over the past 5 months clearly goes way beyond that view. The evidence is in, and in my view, a public inquiry is the only way forward, having regard to the current extraordinary circumstances. Any person appointed to hold an inquiry has considerable powers, authorities, protections, and immunities. Witnesses or persons summoned by or appearing at the inquiry have strict obligations. It is the only way to the truth on many matters that remain of concern to the Wingecarribee Shire community. I move that the minute be noted and that my letter to the Minister be endorsed and declare that carried. If I could just say, in relation to this building, it's as muddy as the landscaping outside. I'm not saying that there's any impropriety, but let's just get to the truth. Okay, there's no declarations of interest, General Manager? Thank you. First item then, look, and because of COVID, and that we won't do introductions for items. The first item is 8.1, appointment of acting General Manager. I've already made mention of the fact that Mr. Ryan will be here for a short period, and I congratulate again the General Manager for doing this in difficult times. In relation to item 8.1, appointment of acting General Manager, I would move the recommendation on page 2 of the business paper, items 1 and 2, and declare it carried. Item 9.1, the bus shelter advertising proposal on page 4 of the business paper. If I could just make it very clear that it was never my intention that the council should make money out of bus shelters. I just thought people should get a fair go. When I arrived here in March, and to a degree April, it was very wet weather. And I was doing a lot of driving around, and I don't know how many people I saw at bus stops with no shelter. You know, mothers with their kids waiting for the school bus and a whole host of things. And to be quite truthful, in 2021, it's not good enough. But the council hasn't got the money to build them. You know, I just thought this is an opportunity we could look at. I'm not saying you should do it. Let's find out what the community thinks. But given the pros and cons, the community may very well say yes. But I've tightened up the recommendation a bit, and I'm not going to move the staff recommendation. I would move in relation to item 9.1 that 1, in consultation with residents, schools and public transport providers, a review be undertaken on the location of all bus stops and shelters in the Shire to determine demand for shelters. 2, respecting heritage conservation areas, a draft bus shelter policy be developed for community consultation, which includes 1, provision for advertising on bus shelters within the commercial and business areas of Moss Vale, Bowral, Mittagong and Bundanoon. Other way, capital M, yeah, goody. 2, the provision of bus shelters without advertising within all other areas of the Shire. Following the adoption of a bus shelter advertising policy, a tender be called for the management of bus shelter management, the maintenance, I'm sorry, comma. Can you put provision, please, after maintenance? Renewal and advertising. Does everyone understand what's on the? I would declare that carried. With no disrespect to the staff, I think the best people to ask about bus stops are the bus drivers. They will know where they see people standing. So I think it's important that the council doesn't have the council staff and myself don't have a mortgage on knowledge, even the councillors. Let's ask the schools and the bus drivers. I'm sure that they will identify even where there might be bus shelters now that aren't used. So I think that this should take that forward. Item 9.2, the draft Penrose Village Park Plan for management, the plan of management. And I thank the staff for hurrying this one along. It'll now dovetail with the grant that the Penrose community have got. And I think that there's discussions going on with that community at the moment as to whether the grant, or I know there's discussions going on with that community, as whether the grant they've got off the federal government will build what they would like to build. I think their costings may be a couple of years old, but they're the kind of things that this council is now doing. We're talking to communities to find out. In relation to item 9.2 on page 9 of the business paper, I would move the officer's recommendation 1, 2 and 3 and declare it carried. Item 9.3, the Southern Highlands Innovation Park, Moss Vale Bypass and Berrima Road deviation. I regret to say this is probably the worst report I have been given since I've arrived at this council. It lacks substance, it lacks direction, and it's not up to scratch. And the general manager shares my view. I can't blame any of the new people on the block. The reason why I know so much about this information is because, of course, all the people I've spoken to in the community groups, I know a little about a lot, and I know a lot's been left out of this report. So in relation to item 9.3, community updates, the Moss Vale bypass, etc., I'm not going to move the officer's recommendation. With the assistance of the staff, senior staff here now, I would move that one, a further detailed report be presented to council to provide the community with surety in relation to these matters. Two, this report to include history and mapping proposed routes to highlight connectivity, timelines, and detailed impact on Argyle Street, especially for heavy vehicles using the Illawarra Highway. And three, Transport for New South Wales be contacted to ascertain the scope of its Moss Vale movement and place study to determine if it includes a strategic assessment of the Illawarra Highway and if council staff can assist them in this work. And I would declare that carried. The report, I couldn't work, I worked out where the so-called bypass was starting, but I couldn't work out where it was finishing. And I really questioned whether it would have an impact on heavy vehicles, which you see coming through, you know, this lovely town, and ruining the ambience. And look, it might take 20, it might take 30 years to get a corridor that links the Hume motorway to non-residential areas of the Illawarra Highway. But unless this council starts planning strategically, none of this is ever going to happen. Uh, 10.1, the Revolving Energy Fund annual report on page 20 of the business paper. Pardon me. I would move the officer's recommendation on page 21 and 2 and declare that carried. The partnership agreement with Service New South Wales for business on page 24 of the business paper, or item 10.2, I would move the officer's recommendation 1 and 2 and declare it carried. Item 10.3, planning proposal to reclassify lots 11, 12 and 13 of Callawah Sheepwash Road, Glen Quarry. On page 46 of the business paper, item 10.3, I would move the officer's recommendation 1 and 2 and declare that carried. To those residents who have spoken to me about this property and its relationship with the sale yards, or the former relationship with the sale yards, it's a work in progress. I'm still looking closer at that matter, but this does not affect that. 10.4, planning proposal to reclassify from community to operational land 7 to 11 Burgess Street, Pundanoon. Item 10.4 on page 52 of the business paper, I would move the officer's recommendation, which is in effect the recommendation of the planning panel, items 1 and 2, and declare that carried. 10.5, planning a proposal to rezone land at 254 Centennial Road, Bowral, the Centennial Vineyards. I would move the officer's recommendation, which is in effect the recommendation of the planning panel outlined on page 59 of the business paper, items 1 and 2, and declare it carried. And the last item on the printed business paper is for item 10.6, planning proposal for provisions relating to secondary dwellings in rural zones. I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 68 of the business paper, and which has been endorsed by the planning panel, and declare that carried. Now, General Manager, there's some late items.
Yes, thank you, Mr. May. We have two late items which have been circulated separately. One relates to the COVID-19 pandemic community and business support measures. And the second item provides Council's submission in relation to the Hume Coal proposal.
Thank you. I would move suspension of standing orders in order to address the items just outlined by the General Manager and declare that carried. Accordingly, I would move in accordance with clause 10.3b of the Code of Meeting Practice, these matters to be of urgency, and that consideration be given to item COVID-19 pandemic community and business support measures, and the Independent Planning Commission New South Wales public hearing, Hume Coal project and Berrima Rail project, and declare that carried. I don't think these have been circulated, but they will be on the business papers. They're information, and I thank the staff on behalf of the community for giving an update on the council's response to COVID-19 and how closely the council is working with chambers in the area and generally through the library and through the Mittagong Welcome Centre. And this recognises that, together with potential for further rate deferment for those who are finding it difficult, and outside eating area waiving of fees across the Shire. You've only got to walk into any of our towns on the weekends and see the people just aren't there. And to be quite frank, those who are coming from Sydney, we're best if they stay there. And that's no disrespect to them, but I think the relief needs to be given. I think there was anything else covered in that report that I should outline?
Thank you, Mr. Interim Administrator. I think it's of value to note some of the future work that we're continuing to investigate. So working with our local businesses in regards to footpath trading and outdoor dining to facilitate our local businesses as much as possible, and to continue to ensure that we're offering all of our services to our local residents in the safest way.
Thanks for that. I would move, and I'll read out it's quite long, the recommendation in relation to item L1, COVID-19 pandemic. And this has been brought on quickly tonight so we can get moving with it because the businesses need help. That one, council adopt a 6-month deferral period for rates and charges for affected businesses and residents who apply and meet the eligibility requirements of council's adopted financial hardship policy. 2, council adopt a full fee reduction for outdoor dining areas, materials on footpath and environment and health inspections, commencing for a period of 6 months from the 1st of August 2021, noting that the budget implications in relation to the measure will be considered as part of the September review of the 2021-22 budget. 3, council undertake a 28-day public notification period in relation to the full fee reduction for outdoor dining fees, materials on footpaths and environment and health inspections in accordance with section 356 of the Local Government Act. 4, council provide a 6-month deferral period for the repayment of interest-free loans, which are currently held with community and sporting organisations. And 5, Council endorse the measures outlined in this report to support the businesses and residents who have been impacted by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown measures imposed on Greater Sydney and other areas. And I would declare that carried. Some may query number 4, but whether the loans have been given legally or illegally in the current circumstances, it would be ridiculous to expect sporting and community organisations who are hardly using them to pay anything. So I think it's a good recommendation on the part of the staff. The next item relates to the Hume Coal and Berrima Rail project. This relates to, in effect, a small reopening of the advertising period to facilitate work done by the Department of Planning to address some issues that were raised. That's generally would be accorded, Mr. Generally, yeah, that would accord with what has happened. Yeah. And I have restated to the Independent Planning Commission the Council's total objection to this proposal. So in relation to item L.1, the Independent Planning Commission Hume Coal Project and Berrima Rail Project, I would move the officer's recommendation that the information on council submissions to the independent planning assessment, that the information on council submissions to the Independent Planning Commission New South Wales public hearing on the Hume Coal Project and Berrima Rail Project, SD 7172 and SSD 7171 be noted and declare that carried. Is there any further matters, General Manager?
Yes, Mr. May, could I just make a short statement providing an update? I just wish to advise that I undertook to move to the Southern Highlands when I accepted the role as General Manager at Wingecarribee, and I'm pleased to advise we have purchased our family home and in the Shire, and COVID willing, we should complete our relocation in the next couple of weeks. Thank you, Mr. May.
Enjoy your isolation. Can I just ask that we record in the minutes for the record, because it's an obligation that the General Manager gave us in her appointment, and General Managers don't have to move to areas, and many of them say they're going to, but then they don't. So I think it shows the calibre of the lady we've appointed. Okay, that's everything. I declare the meeting closed, and thank you for your attendance.